Hey, everybody that might just be starting to tune in. Thank you for being here tonight. We'll be getting started with a presentation right at 6. And as you're starting to enter our webinar, we'd appreciate it if everyone filled the sign-in form. And we'll be putting a link in the chat for you as well. The sign-in form does become a part of the public record for the project, but the information is only going to be used to monitor attendance at our public meetings and just really for data collection purposes. So it's definitely not a requirement to participate, but the information is helpful to us. So you could feel free to put in as little or as much detail as you'd like. And thanks again for being here. Greetings to the folks that continue to trickle in a little bit. We'll be getting started right at 6. So thank you for joining us. And as you're joining, we'll try to cycle through the sign-in sheet. If folks would like to complete that, we'd definitely appreciate it. So thank you for joining us tonight. Oh, there. Sorry about that. If you thought I was talking, I was. Turns out I forgot how the internet worked and didn't unmute myself. But thank you for joining us today. My name is Bree Binabus, and I'm part of the public involvement team with the study, and I'll be helping moderate the meeting this evening with some of the other members of our public involvement group. The meeting that you are at is the virtual scoping meeting for the Big Cottonwood Canyon environmental study. This meeting is being recorded as part of the project record, and we'll be putting a copy of the recording on our project website probably tomorrow. And barring any unforeseen technological issues, we are live streaming on the UDOT Cottonwoods Facebook page and hopefully to our website shortly if you've somehow become disconnected from the webinar, but barring any unforeseen technical difficulties. With that, I'd like to do a quick round of introductions for some of our key team members who are going to be joining us tonight. And let's get into that. First up, we've got Devin Weeder, who is the UDOT project manager overseeing the entire study. Carissa Watanabe is UDOT's environmental program manager for this study. We've got Terry Warner, who is our consultant project manager. Amy Croft, our consultant environmental lead. Tim Baird, who is our consultant on traffic and traffic analysis. Andrea Clayton as our National Environmental Policy Act advisor. And last but certainly not least, we have Erica Mendoza and Gray Thomas, who are providing a ton of support for the public involvement effort. And on a side note, if you ever wondered who reads the comments that you submit, this group of folks that we just listed were it. So with that, let's open. Sorry, gang. I just realized all you were looking at was our lovely opening screen, but there's our team members if you were curious. And getting into just a little bit of the logistics before we get started, just to kind of set up how the evening's going to go. So after the presentation, we're going to try to go through and answer as many questions as we can until 7 o'clock tonight, and we'll be taking questions through the Q&A function on your screen. So just kind of take a look to find that, depending if what type of browser that you're using. And if your question doesn't get answered this evening, please make sure to submit that as a formal comment, so that way we'll still get a chance to review it anyway. And just a quick reminder, everyone was really great last night that we got to meet. So if you did come to our open house, thank you. And if you're new, any questions and comments that are going to be submitted through our online tools need to follow our social media policy participant code of conduct. So basically what that means is any questions or comments that have foul language or threats or any sort of obscenity, we're not going to answer those questions, and those folks may be asked to leave the meeting. I don't really think it's going to be an issue. Everybody that we've been meeting so far has been really great, but just wanted to put that out there. So we're going to do our best to get through everything, but just because you submit a question in the Q&A isn't a guarantee that it'll get answered tonight. We're going to be collecting all these questions, though, reviewing them and just kind of grouping them according to commonly asked subjects for when we want to, or not want, but for when we do respond to folks. And just kind of a quick note as well, all of the questions or comments that you leave in the Q&A during the meeting are incredibly helpful to us, especially when they're really specific. However, they're not considered formal comments in our study process. So this is really just kind of a Q&A to help answer questions and make sure folks understand things. But we do ask that you please submit any of those questions and comments tonight as formal comments. And our study website has a lot of great information on our contact information as well. And Carissa will be talking about that a little bit later in the meeting. And then, yeah, just if you get a chance to sign the sign-in sheet, we would greatly appreciate that. And the last thing I just wanted to share is that as you're following along with the presentation, if the graphics seem a little bit harder to read, especially if you have a smaller screen, we do have all these graphics are present in the display boards, the large scroll plot map, and a copy of the presentation all on the website. So if you have any difficulty viewing things, those items are available for you to zoom in a little bit closer if you'd like to. So with that, thank you so much for letting me walk through the logistics. And I'd like to turn the time over to Devin to give an overview of the study and get us kicked off.
All right. Thanks, Bree. And thanks for everyone who's joining online. I really appreciate it. Our team's put a lot of work into this, even in this early phase, and we're excited to hear what you have to think about it. So the purpose for this study is to evaluate tolling and enhanced bus service in Big Cottonwood Canyon. As we've all seen, traffic congestion in the canyon has gotten a lot worse over the last few years. And with the funding that was allocated by the Utah Legislature in Senate Bill 2 in 2023, we're looking for feedback on how to best implement the enhanced bus service and tolling. So as you can see here with the blue shading, this is the study area. It's SR 190, which is Big Cottonwood Canyon. And we're going from the Fort Union Boulevard and Wasatch Boulevard intersection all the way to the Brighton Loop. We're going to be evaluating any potential impacts to environmental resources, which could include wetlands, special status species, or cultural and historic resources. We're also going to be assessing the relevant forest management plan standards, guidelines, and management prescriptions from the Forest Service. So in conjunction with the Forest Service, we're going to determine what actions might be required from them for this study. and I'll hand it off to Terry.
Yeah, good evening, everybody. Yeah, the project need is, as Devin mentioned, to address congestion that is expected to continue to increase as the population along the Wasatch Front continues to increase, and as winter recreation and tourism in Utah continue to increase. For those of you like me that are older, kind of older-ish, and live along the Wasatch Front for a while, we're kind of keenly familiar with the impacts of the past, decade plus of high growth. And I've been involved in several projects over the years, right? As engineers and planners, we're always looking to forecast future conditions in order to size these infrastructure investments. Well, those, what I thought were aggressive population forecasts actually materialized. Right? I saw a report from the University of Utah that compared their projections done in 2010 with the actual population in 2020. And those projections were off by only like 0.5% statewide. And their projections were, maybe even underestimated the population along the Wasatch Front. And so, yeah, the idea of 1 million more people along that Wasatch Front is pretty staggering. But it's that high growth is really not anticipated to subside over our 25-year planning horizon that UDOT is using for this study. And I'm sure a large portion of our audience is familiar with what that has done. That growth has done to the traffic congestion issues in Big Cottonwood. So we know that today, approximately 3.2 million people annually visit the Cottonwood Canyons. We know that a large percentage of those people are, visiting in the winter, and a large percentage of those people are wanting to access the ski resorts during the peak morning hours. And so, so that kind of sets the foundation of the project need. And I'm going to turn the time over to Tim, who's going to talk about a little bit about what that means for SR 190 in Big Cottonwood Canyon.
Thank you, Terry. In order to understand current and likely future travel conditions in Big Cottonwood, our team reviewed trends from over the last decade in traffic counts and visitation to Big Cottonwood. And that included a deep dive on every hour of available traffic count and travel time data over the past 3 seasons. Based on that analysis and other supplemental data that we've been bringing to bear on it, our projection is that peak days will see an increase of over 20% in terms of higher vehicle demand going up the canyon each day by 2050. We're looking at about an increase from 7,200 vehicles to over 8,700 vehicles heading up canyon. And we know that the majority of those vehicles that are arriving during your morning peak hours are heading up to Solitude or Brighton resorts. At the same time, our review of traffic data shows that SR 190 can only realistically carry about 1,000 to 1,200 vehicles per hour up the canyon under good conditions, and even less when weather and roadway conditions are poor. Vehicles are sliding around, moving more slowly, have poor visibility, and so forth. And so when more vehicles are trying to get into the canyon than it can accommodate during those peak hours, what we see and what we've all experienced are those large queues on Wasatch Boulevard and other access routes that build up. Next slide, please. As of the 2023-2024 season last year, a busy day with good road conditions saw an average trip from Fort Union up to the Brighton Loop taking about 26 minutes up canyon in the morning and about a half hour down canyon in the afternoon. If those projected demands that we see happening in 2050 continue to show up during peak times in private vehicles, our traffic modeling suggests that those times would increase to nearly 50 minutes, or up to about an 85% increase. If that were to come to pass, queues would also extend to well over a mile out to about I-215. And again, that's without taking those more difficult weather and roadway conditions, snow, ice, emergencies, and so on into account that can further increase congestion and backups. So with that, I'll pass the baton back to Devin.
Thanks, Tim. So yeah, with all of that kind of being laid out, the existing condition, what we see happening in 2050 if we don't take any action, with this study, we are looking at these project features that you see on the screen. We're looking at enhanced bus service, and I'm going to go into more detail over the next few slides on exactly what these are. We're looking at an enhanced bus service, resort bus stops, improved existing bus stops in the mid-canyon, a mobility hub at the mouth of the canyon, and then tolling. So the enhanced bus service would be providing a bus service from the mobility hub to the point shown on the screen with, in peak times, a bus would leave the mobility hub every 5 to 10 minutes, somewhere in that range, depending on the traffic. Sorry, I got off my slide. There we go. Now, can you go back to the enhanced bus service real quick? So this is a significant increase in the bus service over what we have currently, as currently we only have a 30-minute service. Next slide, thanks. So the resort bus stops, we would have one at Solitude and one at Brighton. These would be enclosed, heated buildings where you could where there might be lockers. It'll be seating and a nice place to wait while you're waiting for a bus to show up. They'll be between 5,000 to 7,000 square feet, and they'll most likely have bathrooms. We're also looking at potential access improvements for the buses to get to these stops so that they can avoid going into the parking lots or getting stuck in traffic as they get to these bus stops. We're also looking at improving the existing bus stops in the mid-canyon. So that's Cardiff Fork, Spruces, and Silver Fork. For the improvements that we're looking to make sure that they meet ADA standards, they meet US Forest Service requirements, and just make them safer for people who are unloading and loading at them, as right now they're right on the edge of the road and the buses don't get out of traffic very well. For the mobility hub, this will be located at what is currently the gravel pit down at the mouth of the canyon, just to the north of the canyon. The mobility hub is basically a parking structure where you can get out of your car and then get onto a bus and have a nice facility where you can do all of that and not have to be out in the weather. You're not, walking a long distance across the giant parking lot. It's a self-contained structure that provides a nice place to get on the bus. We're looking into how many cars that structure will need to house. That's part of our analysis that we're going to be going over in the next few months. So by the time we get to our document release, we'll be able to say how big that structure should be. We're also looking at tolling. The goal for the toll is to encourage transit use while minimizing the impact to the public. So for that, we're proposing that the toll will start right below entry 1, as 90% of traffic goes to the upper canyon. The price for the toll would probably vary depending on how well the road is functioning, and there may not be a toll if there is no congestion in the canyon. I'll hand it off now to Carissa to talk about the study process and the timeline.
Thanks, Devin. So this slide shows the process for our project. So UDOT will be preparing this environmental study in accordance with the National Environmental Policy Act, or NEPA, when it requires agencies to evaluate potential impacts to the natural and built environment for the proposed action. So while we have not formally designated the class of action or type of NEPA document, we anticipate this project will be an environmental assessment. And that process is what's reflected on the timeline shown. So we had the kickoff of the process in what we call pre-scoping activities, and that was gathering and preparing the information that has been shared with you tonight. And so as you can see, we are currently in the scoping phase. And as part of the environmental process, there are 2 formal comment periods where we are actively encouraging you to provide feedback. So one is right now, and the second will be when we publish the environmental document and hold a public hearing, which we anticipate to be later next fall. UDOT will then issue a decision in winter of 2025, So overall, about an 18-month project schedule. And it's important to keep in mind that environmental studies are process driven, so this schedule is subject to change. Okay, public comment period. So the 30-day comment period has officially started and runs through December 13th. For the scoping phase, we're largely seeking community input on the draft purpose and need, observations or concerns associated with wintertime transportation needs, and social and environmental resources that may be of particular concern to you. So focusing your comments on these topics and giving us details and examples is incredibly helpful to our team at this phase of the study. And how will your input be used? So once the scoping comment period ends, we'll review every single comment that has been received. And just a reminder that commenting is not a vote, but the comments will help us to identify potential impacts to resources or other issues we may not have thought about. So it's important to submit those comments as we're finalizing our purpose and need and developing the components of our proposed action. And we have set up a variety of outreach channels for you to provide feedback during the formal scoping comment period. And again, just a reminder, I know we said it earlier, any comments submitted tonight during the Q&A are not considered formal comments. So to make a formal comment, please send us your comment through email using the comment form on our website, mail in a comment to the address shown on the screen, or give us a call on the voicemail, or even shoot us a text. And so you can scan the QR code that you see on your screen, and that should take you directly to our website. And while we welcome your input at any point throughout the study, if you would like to provide a formal comment during the scoping period, please do so by December 13th. And now I will turn it back over to Bree to moderate the Q&A session.
Well, thank you, Carissa. Appreciate that. And thanks to the team. We were really efficient tonight. So that means for you in our audience, we can shift gears to the Q&A portion a little bit ahead of schedule and leave some time to answer as many questions as we can. So I believe that the Q&A feature should now be enabled in the chat. So this is where we'd like you to enter your questions for the team. I'll read each comment out loud for the group, so that way everyone can kind of know what we're asking. And Devin or one of our other team members will answer those questions in the order that are received. And to really help answer as many questions from as many people as possible, if you do enter multiple questions back to back, we're going to address the first question first and circle back to your remaining questions once we've gotten through kind of the first questions for some of the other participants, just to try to hear from as many different folks as we can tonight. And hopefully we can get through everybody, but if not, we're definitely going to take note of all of the remaining questions. And I would also encourage everybody to really reiterate Chris's point as well, to please submit those as formal comments. So with that, let's get this started, shall we? Our first question, team, is coming from, and just let me stop sharing my screen too, so you can see the whole gang. There we go. Oh, sorry, Erica, you might need to kick me off. But our first question is from Katie B, because I might mispronounce your last name. But how does UDOT plan to work with the ski resorts to ensure communities aren't priced out of Big Cottonwood Canyon? Example, accumulation of fees between tolls, unpredictability of demand-based tolling, parking reservation fees at resorts, pass prices, etc. So Devin, on to you, unless you'd like to delegate.
No, yeah, I'll take this one. So Katie, thanks for your question. We only have control over certain things in the canyon, right? So we can control how much we charge for the buses, and we can charge how much we control for the toll. So the whole point of the busing is to provide that low cost option, even when the toll has to be in place. The toll wall might not be what we all want, right? It is the only way that UDOT has in our control to say there's too many people going up this canyon. So if we all want to keep going up the canyon, you need to get out of your car and get on the bus. We're not in control of what resorts charge. We're not in control of how many people want to go up the canyon. All we can control is how you get up the canyon. And so that's what the toll is for. And that's why the bus will always be that lower cost option for you to be able to get up the canyon.
Excellent. Thanks, Devin. Next question from Taylor Lemon. If a toll is implemented, drivers will overwhelm Silver Fork, Spruces, and Cardiff Fork, and then catch the bus to the ski resort. That won't reduce congestion, right?
Yeah.
Devin, back to you.
Yeah, we've heard this one, and we've a couple times yesterday, and we had thought about it before. And this is definitely something we're going to have to address as part of the study. We don't want to have induced demand into the canyon that kind of defeats the purpose. And so yeah, we'll have to address this in the study.
Great, thanks, Devin. Let's get to our next question. Perrine Anderson. Oh, sorry, that might just be to add other question. B Hall, who will own or manage the bus system? UTA?
So right now, UDOT has been funded with the money to purchase the buses and get it up and running. But who's going to operate it is unknown at this point. It could be UDOT, it could be UTA, or it could be a third party, but we haven't made that decision yet.
Okay. Thanks, Devin. L&D, are you evaluating traffic patterns in the summer? Why or why not?
Tim, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, happy to. At this point, our traffic modeling and investigation is focused on the winter months. That's really consistent with the study purpose and need of addressing wintertime congestion issues. We are aware that we also see very heavy usage during the summer, although it's not as concentrated during particular peak times. It doesn't have the same obstacles around winter weather conditions and roadway conditions that we see during the year. So yeah, this time we're really focusing on the winter conditions in terms of the traffic modeling. Anything to add, Devin?
No, and I think this kind of ties into the next question as well. Bree, if you want to read that one.
Yes. What about year-round enhanced bus service from David A?
Yeah, so everything that Tim said, but also, yeah, this study is very much focused on the wintertime issue. It is where we see the largest problems. And so when we're talking about, how do we solve a problem that's continuous and a problem that is, reoccurring on, every weekend for this time frame, that's what we're focused on right now.
Great, thanks, Devin. Our next question, and I apologize if I mispronounced this, Vaishali A. Any plans for current BCC Park and Ride? What is the future of the BCC Park and Ride?
Yeah, so the bus would no longer serve that park and ride because the bus would only go to the mobility hub and then up the canyon. So that's kind of up to discussion. I don't think it will be addressed in this study because the ownership of that park and ride is actually quite complicated. And our management, there's a bunch of people with interest there. And so we probably won't address it with this study, but it's not going to go away. It'll probably just go to a different use.
Great. Next question from Ron Hilton. This seems like a good idea, but why was a gondola chosen instead of a bus for Little Cottonwood Canyon?
Yeah, so I guess for that question, I would say that you should go and look into the Little Cottonwood EIS rod and why the gondola was chosen for Little Cottonwood is all laid out there. But phase 1 of Little Cottonwood Canyon EIS is a busing system very similar to what we're looking into in this study.
Yep. And Devin, I think it's important to add to, phases 2 and 3, which, the gondola and some of those other items are not currently funded anyway. But let's get to our next question from B Hall. Why no plans for enhancing bus service to the mouth of the canyons?
Yeah, so that does not need an environmental study to do that. And so this environmental study is just looking at the things that we need to do that need to be cleared environmentally. UTA could increase the service to the mouth of the canyon. that does not need an environmental study to do that.
Great. Next question, Perrine Anderson. Are you thinking a toll booth along the line of the one on the summer road at Alta? And will there be an annual pass?
So we're not going to lay out exactly how the tolling system will like technically function in this study, but no, we're not thinking that it's going to be like everyone has to stop. It will most likely be electronic. So you just drive through and you get charged. We're not trying to avoid any friction in the system. And there could be an annual pass, but we're not going to lay out how exactly that'll work in this environmental study. But yeah, I mean, yeah, there are a world of options for how that could be charged.
All right, thank you. Next question from Tom Ward. How will tolling coordinate with parking reservations at the resorts and with the town on the road? Can reservations replace a toll?
So that coordination is something that we're going to have to be doing. And I mean, we already work really closely with the resorts and with the town. And so we're going to have those conversations once we get this environmental clearance to how they can all work together to lower the traffic in the canyon. Like I've said before, there's only certain things that we're in control of in the canyon as UDOT, and we're not in charge of where parking can be charged for and where it can't. So for us, we can charge a toll. You know, the resorts can charge for parking, and we can work together to figure out a system that works.
Next question from Julie Smith. Carissa, I think this one might be for you. So UDOT is referencing an official scoping period, yet there is not a notice of intent under NEPA published. Is this to imply that this will be an environmental assessment?
Yes, we do intend to prepare an environmental assessment, and we just have not formally made that determination yet. And so there are a number of activities allowed, that you're allowed to do prior to making that determination, or in the case of an EIS, publishing an NOI. So developing your purpose need, potential alternatives, and looking at impacts. So there's a lot of upfront work before you make that official determination and either issue an NOI in the case of an EIS. In our case, most likely it will be a determination to prepare an environmental assessment.
Great, thanks, Carissa. Our next question from U.S. Service Volunteer. What measures are being considered to address traffic congestion on Wasatch Boulevard near the mobility hub?
Yeah, it's a great question. So in Little Cottonwood Canyon EIS, in the ROD, it actually cleared a grade separated interchange that would go into that mobility hub. So that with that grade separated interchange, you would have off ramps, you'd have a no signalized intersection. And so that would provide a really good throughput into and out of the mobility hub so that you are able to handle the volume of cars that are going into and out of it.
Great, thanks, Devin. Next question from Spencer Shaver of Save Our Canyons. The 2003 U.S. Forest Service revised forest plan clearly states protection of waterhead conditions will be a primary factor in managing roads, trails, and access. In the Tri-Canyon area, Big and Little Cottonwood Canyons and Mill Creek, parking capacities of canyon parking lots, so ski areas, summer use, homes, developed and dispersed recreation sites, will not exceed 2,000 levels unless modification is needed for watershed protection or to facilitate mass transit. Mass transit will be commonly used during winter, reducing crowding and increasing safety for users of the canyons. The Forest Service will work actively with other parties to explore options for reducing private vehicular use within these canyons. Is reducing private vehicular use within BCC a factor being considered within the scope of UDOT's study?
So I don't know, Adam, if you want to, go ahead, Adam.
Yeah, I can weigh in on that. Yeah. So definitely with this being one of the desired future conditions, that's one of the factors that we'd be working towards in the future. Having reduced private vehicular use in Big Cottonwood, that may be one of the factors being considered within the scope of this study. That would be something that would be the lead agency could consider. So I encourage you to make that an official comment for the lead agency to consider. So Beyond that, it does seem as if the increased bus service would be designed or intended to reduce private vehicular use in the canyon. So I think we're incrementally meeting that desired future condition.
Yeah, I guess I would just add, it depends on what, so the toll is the way we would do that, right? The toll with the busing being the way you can serve the same amount of people while reducing private vehicular use. And so then that becomes a question, and I think you should comment on this in the study, is how is the toll, like how is the toll set? Is it set to make the road, because right now the road is, like Tim said, we're serving about 1,000 to 1,200 cars per hour. And that's just as much as the road can serve, and we're hitting that point a lot. So is the toll set to keep it like at that maximum, or is the toll set to make it so the road actually is serving less than its maximum? I think like that's something that I would, appreciate comments on.
Great, thanks you both. And Adam, thank you for joining us from the forest tonight. Really appreciate that. Next question from Eric. How are you going to build the bus stops at the resorts when they can't even put a bathroom at Eagle at Solitude because of forest land?
Well, we're going to work with our partners in the Forest Service and Salt Lake City, and then, the surrounding, and Brighton, and, the town of Brighton, I should say, and get bathrooms there. So, that's water that we'll need, and, building permits. And so we're going to work with our partners to be able to have those bathrooms.
Great. Next question from Jody. Will property owners be paying a toll to get to their property? Specifically, will there be a difference between the owners above versus below the toll?
Yeah, this is a comment we've received a lot, and similar to Little Cottonwood Canyon EIS, when talking about the toll in that study, we're going to be looking into not charging people, but it's something that we could do, but it's, still up for debate.
Next question from Ken. Will the bus service include places other than the resorts? Cardiff, others?
Yeah, so we see it serving the same places that it already serves, which is Cardiff, Spruces, and Silver Fork. If you think that there's a major place that it should serve outside of those three, please make a comment. When we've been having conversations, we're not hearing that it should serve those anywhere else. The only place we have heard is Guardsman, but Guardsman, just the features of trying to get a bus up there is really, really difficult. So outside of Guardsman, we're not hearing that there's another place it should serve, but please make a comment if you think there is.
Excellent. Thanks, Devin. Next question from Margaret. Have you identified obstacles to obtaining the land for a mobility hub? Can the state or appropriate entity obtain rights to the land currently housing the gravel pit?
We haven't found any obstacles. I mean, we have discussions with the current landowner, and those seem to be very productive discussions, but until the study's done, we probably won't be purchasing any land. And so, no, I don't think there will be any issues with finding a place for the mobility hub.
Okay, great. Next question from Rachel. Does any of this proposal include any road widening or impact to hiking trails, climbing routes, etc.?
We are looking at minor road widenings, but only where it comes to making the bus service function a little better. So very small areas, maybe near the existing bus stops or the resort bus stops. And so we do not foresee any impacts to hiking trails or climbing routes.
And probably a similarly related question from Julie. Second question, how much impervious surface area is expected to be introduced with the construction of the proposed mobility hub?
So that's a great question, but we're not at that stage. So we're looking into that currently. That's something that will be determined by the next fall when we have the document release. So right now we're just in the scoping period. We haven't gotten to that step of the study yet.
All right. Next question from Anti-Tollman. Why should we trust UDOT after the way the decision was handled for Highway 210 and LCC, where 93% of citizens and both impacted cities opposed the gondola option.
Well, I mean, honestly, like I know that we are following the NEPA process, right? We go through this process, we listen to all the comments, we consider all the comments, and that's, you know, we do what we can to include all of your comments in the decision. And we take both the technical analysis and your comments and come to the decision that we think is best. So I hope that we can earn your trust through the study process. And if you, if you please reach out to me. My contact info is available. Please make a comment and reach out, and I hope I can earn your trust through the study process.
Thanks, Devin. Next question from Margaret. Senate Bill 2 authorized money for the Mobility Hub resort bus stops, enhanced busing and tolling for BCC and LCC. Do lawsuits stop using that money in LCC but not BCC?
So yeah, currently the Little Cottonwood EIS is under a lawsuit. So we're not spending large sums of money progressing that into the implementation phase. But there are there's no lawsuits against this currently. So we don't, when we get to, you know, the final document release, the final decision in this project, we should be able to go ahead and implement it. We most likely would not implement the toll in Big because just as in the Little Cottonwood EIS document, we don't want to have disparate impact from the toll. So we wouldn't want to toll Big but not Little, because then we'd be encouraging people to not go up Big and go up Little. And so we don't want to start a toll until we can toll both canyons, but we could start a bus service in Big before we started it in Little. Hopefully we can have them all going at the same time so we can serve all the resorts and everyone can get where they want to go. But that's up to the courts.
Next question from Spencer Shaver again from Saber Canyons. Can UDOT clarify how much the road width might be expanded as a result of the environmental review for Big Cottonwood Canyon? Specifically, what are the proposed dimensions for any widening, and how will UDOT balance safety and capacity improvements with minimizing impacts on surrounding natural areas and existing ecosystems?
Yeah, so as I said with the other question about road widening, we're not looking at any large scale or even medium scale road widening. We're only looking at like very focused areas. So like for bus pullouts, or, you know, just like a very short section of bus lane to get around a place where there's generally queuing. And so we're only looking at, you know, adding very minor road widths in very minor locations. And so we don't have like a, you know, we're not saying, okay, this will be the width of the new road up the canyon. It's just only in very localized areas where we would add pavement.
Next question from Cheryl. We are local Silver Lakes Estates residents located near the Nordic Center. This is our full-time home. Why not move the toll to the parking lot entrances and not Solitude Lower Lot 1, so to not impact our service providers, family, and friends who visit?
So just so I guess I think you're asking like, why not just toll when you drive into a parking lot? And right now there's a lot of parking on the roadway. So if people were thinking they could just drive up and park on the roadside, we'd still have a lot of people driving up hoping they could get that spot that's on the roadway. And so it's something we can look into to see if maybe that could work, but we haven't analyzed that, but we can look into it. So please make an official comment to that effect.
Next question is from Rebecca. Is the toll money going to go to the resorts, or will it go to UDOT and bus drivers?
How exactly the toll money will be spent has not been decided. That's more of a legislative decision, or a, you know, like there needs to be a law that says how the money will be spent. But this is money that UDOT would collect. This is not money that would be collected by the resorts. So it would be state funds, and then would be being able to be spent by the state.
Right, next question. I think, Chris, this might be a good NEPA one for you. NEPA from Ellen. NEPA requires you to do a year-round EA to comply with NEPA. Anything to add?
Yeah, the goal is to complete an environmental assessment in 1 year. And so that's why they also do allow, kind of the pre-scoping activities that we did earlier this year, doing some traffic studies, developing our draft purpose and need, doing cultural surveys in the canyon, because obviously, there's snow on the ground, so you can't go do cultural surveys when there's a bunch of snow on the ground. So we will likely be issuing a determination to prepare an environmental assessment, and that is what officially kicks off the 1-year timeline.
And Kristen, maybe to clarify a little bit, I think Elle's comment was more maybe requiring UDOT to do a year-round NEPA study as opposed to just focusing on the winter. But I do love your answer, though. That was also really helpful for the guidelines. But maybe if there's something you'd like to add to that question for a year-round versus winter.
Yeah. So the wintertime congestion and the users are different than the summertime, and you don't have to, if just because we're implementing winter doesn't mean we have to implement summer, or if you were going to implement summer doesn't mean you would have to implement winter.
All right, thanks. Yeah. Next question back to Vaishali. Any plans for a bus stop at Bengal Boulevard and Wasatch Boulevard? Can you please repeat what you said about having on-street stops in the canyon versus stops that are difficult for buses to pull in and out of?
Sure. Yeah. So currently the buses the way we're looking at it, they'll only go from the mobility hub, which is just north of Big Cottonwood Canyon, and it would go straight up the canyon. So there wouldn't be service coming from the south. So we would never go to Bengal and Wasatch because that's just to the south of the canyon. If you see a huge need and you really would want a service coming from the south, please make a comment to that effect, an official comment. And then about the on-street stops versus stops that are difficult. So I guess our intent is to get all of these bus stops to be so that the bus can pull all the way off the roadway, be out of traffic. People can board and get off the bus safely out of traffic, and not have to be worrying if there's going to be a car whipping around the bus or something like that. And also keeping the buses out of the parking lots at the resorts is really important for the round trip time so that the bus doesn't get stuck behind cars trying to leave the resort. So that's kind of the intent for the improved bus stops and the resort bus stops, is just get the buses out of traffic, but also keep them near the roadway so they can get back into traffic.
Great. Next question from Taylor. I understand UDOT does not have control over resort parking rates, but are you at least talking to the resorts and coordinating action with them?
Yeah, we talk to them very frequently. They're really good partners, and we're really glad that they're working so well with us. Even though, we have disagreements over certain parts, but we're working really well together to make sure that, we're meeting the need and the demand from people to go to the resorts while also not, horribly impacting their business.
Next question, U.S. Service Volunteer. Any bus service being considered between the BCC Mobility Hub and LCC Transit, either from there up LCC or to a mobility hub accessing LCC? This would reduce congestion and vehicle miles traveled southbound on Wasatch Boulevard in the mornings and northbound in the afternoons.
So I'm not quite sure what you mean by LCC Transit, but in the Little Cottonwood EIS, it cleared a bus service that would run from the mobility hub up to Snowbird and Alta. So there will be 2 bus services, one going up Big and one going up Little, both from the mobility hub. So that would reduce the vehicle miles traveled southbound on Wasatch, and northbound. So yeah, it will reduce the number of vehicles on Wasatch in both directions. And that's not part of this study. That was already cleared in Little Cottonwood EIS.
Great, thanks, Devin. Next question from Kate. Will there be a pass available for residents that live up the canyon so they are not charged daily to get to and from their homes?
Yeah, so I answered this a little bit earlier, but that is something we're looking at. It's something that was addressed in the Little Cottonwood EIS, and so we'll probably address it very similarly. This is something that we could give an exemption for residents, workers up the canyon, and similar people like that.
Great. Next question from Brixon. I am curious if there has been or will be a capacity study for Big Cottonwood Central Wasatch area. How many people can reasonably visit this canyon on a daily, yearly, long-term basis without negative impacts such as environmental degradation, decline in water quality, and loss of the nature experience?
Yeah, so Adam, can you take this one?
Sure. Yeah. We don't have any plans to do a carrying capacity study at this time. Capacity is a really important function of infrastructure. So as our infrastructure changes, so too can our capacity. So, this may be one way in which we can deal with the additional visitation of the canyon by increasing bus service and having a toll in place. So at this time, though, there isn't any plan to do a capacity study for the Big Cottonwood Canyon.
Great, thank you.
Moving on to our next question. As you mentioned in the data, the majority of users are transporting directly to two businesses, Solitude and Brighton. What financial responsibility should they contribute since they primarily benefit from user capacity?
Sure. So this question comes up a lot, and right now, Brighton and Solitude both cover the cost to ride the bus for all of their season pass holders. And if you're an Icon pass holder, that's also covered. And so they are paying significantly into the bus system as it is right now. I would expect that would continue into the future. But that's not something we would necessarily cover in the environmental study. That's more of like a policy and practice question. And so please leave a comment to that effect, but it's not necessarily something that we can address or that we can address in this study. That's more of a policy question.
Okay. Great. Moving on to Rebecca. Are there plans to put in place to prepare buses for transportation during winter weather to help avoid accidents in the mountains?
Yeah, it's definitely something we can address in the study, is make recommendations for what kind of equipment these buses could have. But it is more of an operations question. And so while we can make recommendations in to that effect, it's not something we're going to have like a requirement in the study that they must be equipped with something, but it is something that we plan to do. They should be able to meet all the same requirements that a personal vehicle would have to meet, and they should exceed it so they can travel up and down the canyon safely.
Great. Next question. Is there consideration for dovetailing into the gondola plan for Little Cottonwood Canyon?
I'm not sure I totally understand this question. So if you want to add another question later on to clarify, I think you mean, are we looking into doing more than just what we're proposing? And no, we're just looking at this plan right now, which is busing and tolling and these improved bus stops. That's all we're looking at in this study.
Great, thank you. Next question. Would there be dedicated bus lanes in the canyon? From Anti-Tollman.
No, there would not be dedicated bus lanes up the canyon. When we look at the environmental impact from widening, so that would basically double the width of the road, and the environmental impact is too great. And so we're not looking at that right now.
Okay. Next question from Brenda. The buses are great, but the parking at the bus stops is awful. I've had to walk a half mile away to catch a bus. There aren't enough buses. By the time the bus gets near to Big Cottonwood, they're all full. It can take an additional 90 minutes to wait for a bus that has room. There should be a bus every 10 to 15 minutes. How do we mitigate those issues?
Well, thank you for the question, Brenda. And this is exactly what this study is meant to address. We're going to have that parking structure at the bottom, and all the buses are going to start at that parking structure. And so this parking structure is going to be sized to accommodate, a lot of cars. We don't know exactly what that size is right now, but I think you'll be very happy what the size is when we release the document. And so that'll, it's going to be a parking structure that's vertical. So you're not going to be walking a half mile. You'll park and you'll take an elevator or an escalator to go down and pick up a bus. So the walk will be, very short, and you'll be able to hop on a bus, and the service starts from the mobility hub. So there's not going to be this thought of, do I need to go pick it up in Midvale by I-15? The bus starts there. So the bus will be empty and waiting and load right at the mobility hub. So there might be other buses that come to the mobility hub, but then you would get off of that bus and get onto the bus that goes up the canyon. And we're looking at 5 to 10 minute service. And so you suggested 10 to 15, and we're exceeding that. We're going to do 5 to 10.
Which is what we love to hear. Next question, Melinda, where will the Silver Fork bus stop be?
So currently it's right near the Silver Fork Lodge. We're looking into that. We may move it, we may keep it in the same place, but please make a comment if you think that it should be a certain place. Make an official comment to that effect. We'd love to hear where you would want it to be.
And our next question is from Steve and Devin. This is probably similar to some that you've already answered, if there's anything else you want to add to it, but do you have the capacity to require that the ski resorts improve their ability to handle parking, e.g. improve how quickly they can get people into their parking areas to reduce congestion on the road?
We don't have like a legal authority to be able to do that. We can work with the ski resorts, and we do, to try to say, hey, we're seeing issues with backing onto the roadway. What is it that we could do to help you out? But we don't, so we work really well together with them, but we don't have an ability to make them do anything.
Thank you. Next question from Steve A. Will the toll be based on the number of passengers, i.e. higher fee for fewer passengers?
No, we're not seeing that it would be, like, we call it HOV, so high occupancy vehicle. We don't see there would be an HOV discount. The only really good way to make sure that a vehicle is actually full of people is to stop them and check, because there's not like a technological way to see inside of a car and see that there's 4 or 5 people in there. And so when we weigh the benefit of allowing HOV versus the negative of stopping every car to make sure that there actually have a lot of people in there, the negatives seem to outweigh the positives. And so this would be a flat fee or a flat toll for no matter how many people you have in your car. Because when we look at it, it's just there's too many cars going up the canyon, and we need to get you out of your car and onto a bus, because the bus can fit 40 or 50 people. Your car can only fit 5 to 8.
Great, thanks, Devin. Next question from Kate. How will tolls and passes work for visitors with rental cars and that are renting homes or hotel rooms and staying in the canyon?
Yeah, so it'll work if you've ever driven in a state that has a toll road. It will work very similar. When you drive through the toll area, the place where we charge the toll, that would go to the rental agency, and then they would forward that toll onto you. For people renting homes or hotel rooms, most likely you'd have to pay the toll if you drive up in the time where we're charging the toll. So we haven't figured out what exactly that time is and how we would determine when the toll's in effect, but that's something we're going to figure out as part of this study. So there will be times where you can drive up and not pay the toll, and you probably would want to drive up during those times anyway, because the road won't be congested.
Great, thanks, Devin. Next question from Katie. Why is the study area limited to SR 190 itself when congestion is expected to queue up to 8,000 feet from the entry of BCC, reaching I-215 according to UDOT's 2050 traffic projections? Is there value in expanding the study area to include portions of Fort Union Boulevard and Wasatch Boulevard?
It's a great question, but when we look at, so the cause of the backup is the canyon. And so what we can do to reduce the backup is in the canyon. We can't really do anything outside of the canyon on Wasatch or Fort Union to resolve the backup. We could do things on the road to mitigate it, to like get people, instead of, so if it's going to back up 8,000 feet, we could make an 8,000 foot long left turn lane, but we don't need an environmental study to do that. There's an existing middle lane. We could turn that into a really long left turn lane, but we don't need an environmental study to do that. So we're focused on improvements inside the canyon to reduce that queue length.
Great. Next question from Grant. How do we plan to address the issue of getting the buses into the mouth of the canyon from the mobility hub? In years past, they got caught in the same snake as everyone else.
Yeah, so it's a great question. I mean, we're going to be doing the mobility hub, and so there can be improvements made in that development to, maybe it can avoid getting on Wasatch, or maybe there is some small changes we can make at the intersection of Wasatch to make those buses get up there faster. And it's something we're considering. So yeah, it's a great comment, and we're thinking about it. If you have a great idea for how we can get them up there faster, please make an official comment to that effect.
Next question from Brenda. Will buses stop at non-ski resort locations, like Red Pine, White Pine Trailhead, etc., for backcountry skiers? If so, does the EAS study include making those parking lots bigger for buses to turn around? This might not be one specific to our study, though, Devin, if you want to touch on this at all.
Yeah, I guess I'll just say Red and White Pine, that's Little Cottonwood. So there's suggestions about the parking lots in Little Cottonwood in the Low County EIS. But for this study, yes, it'll stop at Cardiff, Spruces, and Silver Fork, and we're going to make minor. They won't enter the parking lots. They would still most likely drop off like on the side of the road, but we would make improvements to make sure you can access the trailheads and have a safe drop off and pickup area at each of those locations.
Nice, thanks. Next question from Rob. Do you expect tolling to be required Monday through Thursday when traffic is much less than Friday, Sunday traffic?
Not right now. So when we look at the data, Monday through Thursday is generally okay. Friday through Sunday is where it's really busy. Obviously, if there's like a huge snowstorm on a Monday, then Tuesday morning it can be really busy. And so that's why we're kind of leaving it. I don't want to define dates and times when the tolling would be in effect. I want to define more of, with the study, define like when it would be effect based on the roadway. So if the roadway isn't going to be functioning correctly because there's too much demand, then the toll would be in effect. But right now we don't see it Monday through Thursday very often.
Right. Next one from Chad. When can we get a year-round study, and who should we appeal to in order to get a year-round multi-canyon analysis in order to solve these complex traffic issues in a more holistic way? Devin, Chris, this is probably for the both of you.
Yeah, I guess the issue for the summer is becoming worse, but it's not currently at the level where we are looking at it. For who you can appeal to, I would say speak to your elected officials and say that this is something you really like and get it funded. Anything to add, Carissa?
I think you covered it.
All right. And just kind of a quick time check. We're going to do some rapid fire to get through the rest of the questions. I really appreciate everybody who's been dropping questions in there. Our team is still continuing to record them, but we are at 6:59. That went awfully quick, gang. Next question from Aiden. Has cyclist safety been given any thought with the grade separated transit hub? How will heavy cyclist traffic be affected on Wasatch Boulevard?
So that was cleared in Little Company EIS, that grade separated transit hub, but it would definitely, the design of it would include safe bicycle use through that interchange.
Okay. Next question from Chad, and Chad might be our last one. Do we have solutions so buses and emergency vehicles will travel faster or have some sort of priority to standard traffic? It seems a toll alone will not take cars off the road in the long run, but may just release latent user demand so the buses are then stuck in the same traffic as everyone else.
Yeah, like I talked about with the bus lanes, just the impact from widening the road that much, because you would double the width of the road. It doesn't seem to be worth, the environmental impact doesn't seem worth the trade-off to get that benefit of having 2 lanes. And so no, there won't be a priority once you're in the canyon. Buses will be mixed in with normal traffic.
All right. Well, gang, thank you for the rapid fire and just all these excellent questions that have been coming through. We have hit our time. So I think with that, I just wanted to say thank you again. And if your question didn't get answered tonight, as I mentioned, our team is continuing to go through those, but also please make sure to submit those as a formal comment. And even for those of you that did ask your questions tonight, we'd still love to have those as formal comments. So that way we can review and address those along with all the other comments and questions that we get coming in throughout the comment period. So just kind of a few last reminders before we sign off for the evening. We will be placing a recording of this full meeting that you participated in tonight on the project website tomorrow. So we'd encourage you to share that with folks who were unable to attend this evening. And then, yeah, just another reminder to submit comments or sign the sign-in sheet if you could. So Devin, I'd love to turn it over to you for another minute or two if you'd like to make any closing remarks this evening.
Yeah, I guess I'd just like to say thanks for all your questions, taking the time out of your evening to come and hear about it and provide those questions. Please make sure you go and leave a public comment by December 13th. You can do it in all the ways that Carissa talked about. You can go to our study website to get a reminder about ways you can leave a comment. And please have a great winter enjoying Big Cottonwood Canyon. We're hoping you can enjoy it better in the future once this is in place.